But I have discovered, and maybe you have too, that when we actually give voice to negative thoughts and beliefs in our brains, something changes. There's unbelievable, creative, and powerful strength in the spoken word and what we actually say about ourselves and we say about others.
Created on purpose and for purpose.
Welcome back to the Daron Early Wine Podcast. Stoked to have you back again for another episode as we're walking through this last element of the Rogue Collective training and development content. We're talking about affirmation today as the third of the four foundations. I'm stoked about this episode, challenged by it, really, and I hope that you experience the same excitement, same challenge as we go through. I want to thank you so much for downloading the episode. I want to thank you for everybody that's joined us over on the YouTube channel and subscribe there. If you didn't know the podcast is on YouTube, go over and check it out, and be huge if you were to hit the subscribe button and join us in that context. So if you watch, if you listen, whatever you do, I really appreciate it. I also want to give a big shout out and a big thank you for those that have joined us as a monthly partner here with the podcast. Everything we do resource-wise and discipleship training-wise as a part of Blackbird Mission. We are a nonprofit, and your generosity is our fuel to keep doing what we do. And so I want to thank you guys that have joined us already in that capacity. If the podcast, if the Spiritual DNA course, if my book, if a lot of stuff we put out, if it's brought value to your life, it's helped you become who you were born to be, we would love for you to join us financially to help us continue to spread this message. You can just go to blackbirdmission.com/give. And you can set up a one-time or a reoccurring gift. And I just want to thank you in advance if that's something you're feeling nudged to do. And so today we're going to jump and talk about affirming and affirmation and what that means. And if you look at the word affirm, I love to look at definitions to understand what a word means, right? And to affirm is literally defined as this: to state as a fact, to assert strongly and publicly. So when we're talking about if we're going to build a life on love, we have to be someone who is a person of affirmation. What we're saying is we're a person who states the facts, right? In an effort to build this life on this foundation, to build a life of love, right? We have to be, another way to say it is we have to be a truth speaker, right? If we're going to speak the facts, it means we're speaking truth. And if you've studied or been mentored at all by Jesus, you know one of the powerful things he says, right, is that you will know the truth and that the truth will set you free. And freedom being one of the noble quests that we're on, it's imperative that we understand what is true about us, what is true about others, and not just as a concept, not just something as we think or that we believe, but it's something that we actually begin to speak, and it's something that we actually begin to take action on. That we would be truth speakers. So it would be people who live and love with truth. And when we do that, what we're going to do, we're not only going to set ourselves free, but we're also going to be someone who sets others free. I think if we got to the end of our life, we looked back and somebody said, man, you know, what was being their son or daughter like? What was being their spouse like? What was their being somebody that worked for them was like? What was it being like being one of their friends? And if they said, you know what? In their life, they just led me into greater freedom in my life. I think we'd take that. I know I would, you know? And if we're going to do that, we're going to be someone who focuses on affirming people. There's power in our words, right? Power in our words. I love this quote by Marcus Aurelius. He says this: if it's not right, do not do it. If it's not true, do not say it. And I think sometimes we don't pay, I'll self-confess. I know I often don't pay enough attention to the words that I speak. I talk a lot, kind of what I do for a living. And my brother is as polar opposite of me as possible. He is probably a 99% introvert. I'm a 99% extrovert. And I remember talking to him one day, and it was in college. And we were hanging out, and oftentimes we would be hanging out with people, and I would say all the words, and Damon, my brother, would say very few words. And there would be times people would come up to me afterwards. They'd be like, think your brother hates me. And I feel like, not at all, right? I just talked to him about, he thinks you're a great person. We really loved hanging out with you last weekend or whatever. Well, he didn't say anything. And as he's sitting there in the silence, like, I think he hates me. So I remember sitting down with my brother and being like, Damon, listen, you got to talk more, right? I know you like people. You have so many wise, great things to say, but like when you don't talk, people, they get antsy. They get distrusting, questioning. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, Daron, whenever you're hanging out with people, he's like, is there ever a pause in the conversation? Like it's your turn to speak. And do you ever get to that point and you just don't have words? And I was like, it sounded impossible. I was like, what do you mean? Do I ever not have words? I'm like, no, what I try to do is stop actually thinking about what I'm going to say before I actually say it when they're speaking, because I'm always thinking about what the next word is. He goes, okay, cool. A lot of times I just don't have words. There just aren't words. Like the pause happens, time for me to speak, and I got nothing. There's just not words. And it was an epiphany for me to understand, wow, like, okay, I can understand, I can see, I can know my brother better, and I can actually help him in this. But for me, I've always had words, and that can be a blessing, right, to have the gift of gab, but it can also be a dangerous part. Where a lot of times there's words that I'm saying that probably don't need to be said. There's words that I'm just saying to say words. And if you're like that, either way in this, right? If you have somebody that has all the words, you have a responsibility to take, responsibility for what you're saying. Go, am I actually putting out words of affirmation, words of life, words of love into the world? And if maybe you're more an introverted person, more like my brother, the reality is you do still have a responsibility and an opportunity. Even though you may have less words, it might be easier for you to begin to choose them wisely because there's less of them. But whatever the case is, we have to be people who affirm one another. And I don't think this is as, maybe we call it as popular as I think it needs to be in our culture. I think, if we're someone who we start affirming our friends, and this may be just in dude culture, right? I know it is when you're a high school or college student, right? If you're a guy who always is like just saying nice things and affirming things to your friends, they're going to be like, dude, what's the deal? You're weird. You know what I mean? Or if you do that in an environment where, maybe you're not the person in a position of power, people go, oh, well, you're just a butt kisser. You know what I mean? Like you're just brown nosing the boss. And you're like, no, I was just actually trying to be affirming. I think it's sad that in our culture to actually be someone who speaks affirmation to lives of others, you're going to be seen as kind of odd, which I think is unbelievably sad. And if we look at this, we want to dig into it. We want to say, I do want to be somebody who builds on love. I want to build this foundation in my life. We have to look at this as all of these foundations are interesting because they're all a two-sided situation. The reality is this, is if I don't know myself, right, or see myself, we talked about the first, two foundations we've gone through is people need to be seen, they need to be known. But the reality is if I can't see myself, right, I won't see others. If I don't see what is true about me, it's going to be very difficult for me to see what is true about others. If I don't know myself, right, as we've talked about already in the 4 core questions, if I don't know my who, if I don't know my why, if I don't know my what, if I don't know my where, it's going to be very difficult for me to see and affirm these truths in others. And as you get to this next step, right, we see people, we know them, then we have to affirm them. If I don't know and I can't affirm myself, I have little hope of actually affirming and encouraging others. As we just talked about in the last episode, I got to know myself, right, to lead myself, right? I've got to lead myself to be able to lead and know others. This is a cycle that starts with me and then it moves to we. And as we start this conversation, the question I want to ask is like, how often do you find yourself affirming yourself? Like how often in your day do you tell yourself what's true about yourself? And here's my guess, and I get a chance to work with a lot of people. And through the past 20 plus years, I've worked with thousands of people to help them discover who God created them to be. And every time I ask this question, and I probably asked it a couple of times on the podcast already in all these hundreds of episodes, right, is who's the meanest person on earth to you? The answer's really quick, pops into your head. I am. Like, I'm the meanest person to me on earth. The things that I think and that I say to myself when I fail, when I don't come through, when I do that thing again that I'm trying not to do, when I'm not the person that I hope to become, it's very, very rare for me to offer myself a lot of compassion and to actually affirm what are the facts about me, to actually speak hope into my own life. And I don't think that's just me. I think that's all of us. And if we're going to have any hope to be somebody who deals in hope, that deals in affirming, that deals in encouraging other people, it has to start with us. It has to be something that we naturally do to ourselves so that we can step in and do that with the lives of others. And I think a lot of this, in being able to be self-affirming, to be able to speak the truth, to be able to speak facts about ourselves, it needs to go from something that it's our thoughts to actually it's what we say. There's so much power in our tongue. And I think sometimes when we have a thought, it's just something that's kind of bouncing around in our mind. And it has influence and it has power. But I have discovered, and maybe you have too, that when we actually give voice to negative thoughts and beliefs in our brains, something changes. There's unbelievable creative and powerful strength in the spoken word and what we actually say about ourselves and we say about others. For me, I believe that the biblical narrative that says that God spoke the world into creation, that there was so much power in what he spoke. And I don't know how that works. And I don't understand, a lot of science or quantum physics and all the things. Like I know what an atom is, but I can't break all that down for you. But I do think it's just amazing that I believe that we are all the result of the creativity of God. And somehow, because God created all that is, he had the ability to think of the molecules and all of the things that needed to happen. And in his amazing creative spirit, he was able just to speak the things into being. And I think that's true about us. We've talked about and understanding what's true about you. We've already gone over this. The understanding that we are created in God's image, that we actually have the creative ability that shows his imprint on us. And so there's amazing power in our words, what we say to ourselves, what we say to others. The wisdom books, right? In Proverbs 18, it says this: death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. It's just true. Like that old phrase that we used to say as kids, right? Sticks and stones may break my old bones, but words will never hurt me, is a bold-faced lie. Like we should have been told as kids, sticks and stones will break your bones, which will heal in 4 to 6 weeks. Not that big of a deal. You might have a scar, but words can ruin and destroy your soul and make marks on you that you may never recover from. That's the honest truth, right? There's death and life in the power of our tongue. Buddha said it this way, right? Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. So true. Mother Teresa says it like this: kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. And I know you've experienced this in your life. And as I've gone through and done a lot of the Rogue Collective coaching, we talk about this, and I ask people to go back and talk about maybe curses that have been spoken over them, words that have been spoken that were not true, but landed. And there's not a person that can't go back to their childhood, whether it's adolescence or it's before that. We know when they were a toddler, all the way through college to adulthood, and they have these negative interactions where someone spoke a word over them that was not true of their essence, of who they were created to be, but it has been something they've been fighting against or wrestling with for their whole life. On the flip side of that, we can also go back to, there are people in your life you would say, that person changed my life. And how did they change your life? They changed your life because of the words they spoke to you that were affirming, that were facts. And that's the kind of person we want to become. So there's great power in the tongue. And last year I was at a conference, And Jesse Itzler was one of the keynote speakers. I don't know if you know Jesse. He's an entrepreneur. I think he's actually a billionaire now because he's created and sold so many businesses. He's an author. He's also an ultra marathon competitor, which means he runs like these 100-mile races and these like last man standing races where I think you have to run like something like 4 miles like 4 miles every hour on the hour, and it's just whoever quits last wins. I'm not a runner. I don't really ever want to become a runner. And so hearing these stories blows my mind. But Chad was trying to do his first, I think, 100-mile race. And he tells the stories. He's an amazing storyteller. And he says he can't get past a mile, like I can't remember what it was, like 60 or something. And so he reaches out to this Navy SEAL coach, a guy named Chad Wright. And Chad is this awesome dude. You Google him. He's a crazy looking dude, long, red beard, tattoos. I mean, just absolute amazing American, Navy SEAL. And Chad is a mental strength like coach. So he says he comes to his house and he hangs out with them, talks to him about what they're going to do. He says, we're going to go out and we're going to run. And he was like, as we run, he said, Jesse, I'm going to ask you how you're doing as you're running. And the only thing that you can respond to me, only thing you can say to me every time I ask you is, I feel outstanding, Chad. So he's like, all right, man, we'll give it a shot. So he goes out the next day, and as they're running, he's getting to his, up to his limit, that he's never run this far. His body's aching. Everything inside of him is saying, just quit, just quit, just quit. The pain is very real. But Chad talks about not giving pain a voice. And so he would ask him, Jesse, how you doing? Jesse would yell out, I feel outstanding, Chad. And he goes out that next day and he breaks his record. He talks about actually going out and finishing this 100-mile ultra marathon. And the story is so inspirational. He may be out there on YouTube somewhere, you can find it. But he just talks about as they get to mile 60, mile 70, mile 80, mile 90, everything inside of Jesse wanted to quit. But he says there was unbelievable power in him of speaking what needed to be true. I feel outstanding, Chad. And he crosses the finish line. There is so much power in our words. And so as we look at this idea of self-affirmation, that's where I want to start. If we're going to affirm others, we've got to be able to affirm ourselves. And as we look at this, here's the 3 things I want you to think about in affirmation for yourself. The first one is this. What is a fact? If we're going to affirm ourselves, we have to affirm what is true about us. Obviously, from a Christian perspective, for me, this goes to the core of saying, every day do I start my day out reminding myself and speaking to myself, I am loved. Today I lived love. I have nothing to prove to God. I have nothing to do to please him, right? I have nothing to do to protect from God because I am unconditionally loved as I am right now. That's a fact. Now, my feelings may not be there. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have to get over in this idea of affirming people is whether we're affirming ourselves or affirming others. A lot of times our feelings are telling us things that are not true. And feelings are wonderful companions in life, but they're terrible leaders. And so in your life, when you're trying to affirm yourself, are you affirming yourself based on how you feel? Because if Jesse had done that, he would have quit probably around mile like 30. I'm sure he felt terrible. His emotions, like his feelings were like, this is terrible. But he was speaking out truth over his life. And so what is fact about you and how often do you tell yourself what's true? In that, I think it's key for us to also, the first question is, what's a fact? Okay, the second thing I would say when we have trying to affirm ourselves is, what is faithful? What is faithful? Now, here's one of the things I think is really difficult that I know I wrestle with in affirming myself is too often I don't affirm myself until something's perfect. And the question is, what if I begin to affirm what is progressing? Like, what if I were to begin to affirm my faithfulness, not my perfection? And then this helps me. A sports analogy here is this, is if I can think baseball stats, not basketball stats in this, it helps me. Let me break that down if you're not familiar, okay? My boys all played baseball. 2 of them still do. And I often have to encourage them, right, that in baseball, if you succeed hitting 30% of the time, you're going to go to the Hall of Fame. 30%, which means 70% of your at-bats are going to end in failure. And so in your life, if the standard you're holding yourself to is more basketball stats, so let's just go with free throw percentage, right? You need to be an 80 to 85% free throw shooter, if not 90, right? To even think about potential of Hall of Fame conversations. If you're a 30% free throw shooter, you're not making the team, you're not getting in the game. Or when you go to the line, they're going to talk about how terrible of a free throw shooter that you are. But just look at the difference of that. If you hit 30% of the time in baseball, Hall of Fame. If you hit 30% of the time, if you make a basket 30% of the time, you're getting cut from the team. And I think too often we're holding ourselves to a standard that's unrealistic as we're becoming who we're born to be. It's step by step. So what is faithful? What if it was to say, every day I'm going to find a way to affirm something that's true about me. I'm going to find a way to actually affirm something that's faithful. Meaning, you know what? I may have failed at the thing I'm trying to succeed at and grow in 70% of the time this week, but 30% of the time I succeeded. And guess what? I'm not going to quit. So I'm going to speak affirmation over my faithfulness. The last thing I would say about this in ourselves is what's in the future, is to actually speak the future into our life. Erwin McManus, one of my favorite authors and mentors, right, says this, that hope is always found in the future. And so if you're trying to affirm, if you're trying to bring hope into your life, you have to look into the future and speak about what is going to be true into your future. So here's the bottom line. If we're ever going to be able to do this in the life of others, we have to do it in our own lives as well. And so you turn the page and you think about what this looks like in someone else's life. Like how often, as you're with your friends, as you're with your spouse, as you're with your kids, as you speak to them, do you stop and say to yourself, okay, what is true about them today? What's the facts? And am I speaking an affirmation of who they are, of who God sees them to be, of who they're becoming? Do I speak facts to them or do I speak my feelings to them? Okay? Looking at the idea of what is faithful. When I speak to my children, when I speak to my spouse, when I speak to my coworkers, when I speak to the people that I lead, when I'm in life and in relationship with people, do I speak to what is faithful about them? And we have to be careful on this. And this is, I've given this parenting tip before, I'll give it again. And I would even say with anybody that you're leading, anybody you're in a relationship with, is oftentimes when someone does something less than desirable in our life, we tend to sometimes unintentionally, I think sometimes intentionally, we use identity shaping words as we speak against them. So let's say that your kid told a lie. It's easy as our feelings get the best of us and we're disappointed and we're scared. Oh, is my kid going to be a low character kid? What's happened? We can say, you're a liar. We have to be very careful of that because when we're using phrases like you are, right? Or even I am, we're speaking to our identity, which is not a fact, right? Because if I lie, right, well, I have told a lie, but I'm not a liar because the fact about me is I'm a dearly loved child of God. Your kids, right, or people you work with, they're also dearly loved children of God. So for you to say you are something that is a negative connotation that connects to a behavior actually begins to deconstruct their ability to become who they are born to be. So you can say you lied, right? But now let me actually affirm what is faithful. Can I affirm what's faithful about the people around me? The next one is this. Can I affirm what's in the future? This is so huge. And when we can actually begin to see people and know people and then affirm what we see in their future, we cannot overestimate the life that we actually begin to breathe into someone's soul. And here's the reason this is so true. We've talked about it before. But all of this whole process, we're operating with what we call factory defect, if you will, and that our brains are set up with what researchers call a negativity bias, meaning that your brain all day, every day is searching for the negative, and it holds on to negative like Velcro. Whereas the more positive things, the more positive comments, the more positive memories, they slide off of our memory like Teflon. And there's actually what they call like a 15-second rule in this idea of neuroscience, where the truth about this is if we don't ruminate, if we don't actually take time to soak in a positive memory, positive image, a positive word spoken to us for somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds, it will not imprint upon our brain. Think about that. But you can hear something in 2 seconds that's negative, and it will cement into your psyche. It will Velcro to your brain. It'll be very hard to take out of it. And so every single person that we're trying to live around, every person that we're trying to love, knowing that every single day they are in a life and death fight against a negativity bias in their head. And just think the difference we could make if we came into every relationship and said, here's what I know. I know they're fighting what feels like a losing battle against negativity, and here's what I can do. I can show up as a dealer of hope and affirmation and encouragement. There's also a study that talks about that it's about a 5-to-1 ratio, about 5-to-1, that takes about 5 positive affirmations to overcome 1 negative. So this little call to action, what if this week you just tried to make sure that when you're interacting at work, you're interacting at home, you're interacting at play, that for every difficult or negative things you might say, that you follow it up or you make sure that it goes 5-to-1 negative to positive. Not only could it change your life, it changed the life of the people around you. I've also given this challenge up before, is this 10 to 15 second affirmation. So often when we affirm someone, it might take 1 or 2 seconds. Hey, great job. Appreciate it. Thanks for being on time today. Hey, thanks for getting your room clean. Thanks. And we think that, hey, we're an encouraging person. The reality is, like I talked about, is if that didn't last about 10 seconds of a conversation, it did not imprint on your kid's life. It didn't imprint on your coworker's life. Didn't imprint on your spouse's life. But what if you took time and go back, what's true about them, right? What's faithful about them? What's in the future about them? And I want to affirm them. And you took 10 to 15 seconds to affirm what was true about them, right? Who they are, why they do what they do better, right? Where they're finding their passion. You're talking about what's true about them, not the behaviors, but what in their essence is true. And every time you affirm someone, it took 10 to 15 seconds to do. Here's what would happen. You would begin to transform the lives of the people around you. You just would. And I think that's what we're after. We're talking about building on these foundations. What do I want my life to be built on? I think we want it to be built on these foundations. I want to see people, I want to know them, and I want to affirm them. Okay? Quick little bonus here as we're landing the plane. I also want to take a look at the reality that affirmation is so important in words, but there's also actions of affirmation. And I love Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. If you haven't read it, go check it out. And in that, Gary gives us some great handles for how we can actually begin to affirm with action. Here are the 5 love languages. They are words of affirmation, which bottom line we've been talking about right now, right? They're also acts of service, quality time, physical touch, and giving gifts. So I want you to take a look at those 5, do a little inventory on those, and ask yourself, which one of these is the easiest for me to do, and which one is one of the places it's a growth area for me? Because there's great power in our words, but there's also great power in our actions, right? For someone to say, you know what, this person is serving me, right? There's a value and a worth in an affirmation that they're giving me, that they're actually serving something that's important to me, giving people quality time. Right? I'm affirming who you are. I'm affirming what I see in you because I'm actually giving you the gift of my time. All of these love languages are so key to take a look at of how do I not just speak words of affirmation, but actually live with actions of affirmation. Right? That's our next, that was our next foundation number 3. And so I want to hear your thoughts on this. Right? Is this super easy for you to do? Is this a challenge for you to do? I'd love to have a conversation through this process. And if you're interested at possibly getting in what we call a band, to join a band to be coached in the Road Collective, I want you to reach out to me. All you got to do is go to roadcollectivecoaching.com. There's a link there, schedule a discovery call. We can jump on a 30-minute call, talk about your situation, talk about where you are, and talk about helping you be put in a band where we can actually help you develop and become who you were born to be. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Daron Early Wine Podcast. Would love to hear from you. You can always email me, Daron@DaronEarlyWine.com. And I would love to be a part of helping you take your next step to become who you were born to be. And until we talk again, remember, God is for you. He is not against you. He is near you, not far away, and He's created you on purpose and for a purpose. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Daron Early Wine Podcast.